Welcome back to Up in the Blue Seats. I'm your host Andrew Harts, filling in for the under the weather Jake Brown, but he'll be back soon, so don't worry. The Podfather will soon return here on the podcast. But I am very happy to be joined by the great Mollie Walker, and we'll also have the Hockey Hall of Famer Larry Brooks on a little bit later in the show today. But we're gonna kick things off with just looking at the Rangers as a whole currently. I mean, it feels like we're riding a roller coaster here, Mollie. I mean, there's a couple good games, there's a couple bad games. We're just going up and down, and now the Rangers are going back out to the West Coast for another road trip. It's struggling for me to watch this Ranger team because there's nights where Igor's on and the Rangers are shooting the puck and they look great, and then other nights it's completely off. And the struggle to find consistency is kind of driving me bonkers a little bit. So I'm just curious, what are you feeling right now? How's the state of the team? What are you seeing?
There's definitely been a lot of whiplash from game to game. I completely agree with that. And I think that those games where you did mention that when Igor's on, high shot volume, and then they're coming out with losses. So I know that the team didn't imagine the season starting off this way. And I think that there's a level of concern a little bit, not anything too crazy, but I think everybody is well aware that this is not how they wanted the season to go. But it's really difficult mentally when you're going from game to game, when you do feel like you've done enough to win, but you're not coming out with the wins. And I think that too often after games, we are talking to these players and talking to head coach Gerard Gallant, and they are saying that they feel like they did enough to win, and that's fine, and they can feel that way. But I feel like we are going to get to a certain point in the season where that kind of answer isn't going to be good enough anymore because they need to win in order to accomplish what they ultimately want to accomplish, and that's build upon last season's run to the Eastern Conference Finals. So I think that the way that the great Larry Brooks put it, it's getting late early. But I think that there's a level of awareness in the locker room about that. And I think that there are a lot of moving parts that need to be cleaned up, and for the Rangers to start putting things together that are their strengths, such as their power play and Igor Shesterkin, being his elite self. But those things, aren't just going to come there. It's got to take everybody pulling the same way, and it hasn't always been that way each and every night. But I definitely will say that there is a level of concern in the locker room, and I think that maybe early on when the losses started to pile up there wasn't, but at this point in the season going into this four city West Coast trip, there definitely is an awareness that things need to change.
Well, it's striking just because of the fact, I mean, they come off that rough game against the Islanders where they just blew that lead in the third, just absolutely killer. And then you come back and then, you absolutely dismantle Detroit, which was, I mean, that game in of itself, another complete roller coaster in a good way, though. It all ended fine, but then you go to Nashville and then you lose another close one there. And then you come back home, and mind you, that win against the Coyotes was so big in my mind, at least. It kind of just it helped fortify where this team is trying to go, it feels like. And again, it's like you mentioned, if you have the good power play running, you have Igor on and he looks good, that's very important. But now again, you're heading out to the West Coast, you got the Kraken, the Sharks, the Kings, the Ducks. It's not necessarily an easy trip. I mean, there's a couple games there where you look at and you go, all right, that should be a W, that should be a W. Coin flip here or there. What exactly are the players, I guess, now currently doing just to try to keep that mental mindset of, staying positive and, trying to turn the ship around, especially after a long trip going out west?
I think that they know what their strengths are. They know what makes them good. And the power play is certainly one of them. And that hasn't always looked as cohesive. And even when it is, if the puck's not going in the back of the net, then it's not doing its job. So we get into this later with Larry Brooks about how Gerard Gallant should probably start managing the ice time for the two power play units a little bit differently. If that first power play unit isn't coming on and getting it done in the 45-50 seconds, it's time to get some fresh legs out there. If they're not scoring immediately, then it's probably not going to come. If you wait the minute and a half, until the very end, and then you give the second unit the scraps and not enough time to get anything going. So I think that there should be some different ways of managing the team going forward, including minutes overall throughout the entire lineup. I mean, I'll tell you, I think it was after the Nashville game, Adam Fox looked like he was about to fall over when I saw him walk out of the locker room. His face was red, and that is no knock on Adam Fox. Like, Adam Fox has probably been the Rangers' best player this entire start to the season. But we saw it happen last year. The load management, it needs to be a little bit better. You cannot burn out Adam Fox 2 months into the season. It's just a recipe for disaster. But I also, to play devil's advocate, I want Adam Fox on the ice at all. I'd play him 30 minutes a game too as well. But that's just not a reality that the Rangers can settle into. And it's going to be detrimental if they keep going at this rate. And obviously we've talked so much about how the Rangers are a top heavy lineup, and that's just how they're built. But I think that there needs to be a little bit better managing going forward. And I think that the players, like I said, just need to be pulling in the same direction. And that hasn't always been the case. And the Miller-Trouba pair has had its struggles, and that's actually an area that I'm planning on looking at today's practice in Seattle. So there's a lot to unpack here, but it's not all bad. And I think this is a good segue into our next thing, of the overreactions, because it's not all bad. It's really not.
It's not. And honestly, as a Ranger fan, like, that's what you have to keep telling yourself. It's not that bad. It's still early in the season, and there's still a lot of time before, things can turn around and whatnot. I mean, you saw what the Rangers did at the deadline last year, and that kind of rejuvenated them. So again, it's still early. Speaking about Adam Fox, just worth noting though, 3rd star of the week for the NHL. So again, it's like you said, he's putting his body out there, he's doing his thing, and it's tough to knock his effort out there. So with that said, yeah, we'll move on to some of the I wrote down a couple things that I keep hearing from Rangers Twitter, and I'm sure you hear it from all your Ranger followers as well too. So I'm kind of curious about your reaction on some of these early season overreactions. So I'll throw a couple at you. Let me know what you think. So the first one I keep hearing is that the Rangers need a better backup goalie than Halak.
I mean, I've been on the Halak train since they signed him. I completely disagree with that. And we got a subtext question from somebody asking about, from a financial standpoint, if the Rangers should bring up Louis Domingue. The Rangers did not sign Halak to put him in Hartford. That's just not what was on the agenda. That's not something that they're going to do. And aside from the 5-1 loss to Columbus in his second start to the season, yeah, he's had that game was bad. He had a bad game, and he acknowledged it. But I still think that he's an adequate backup, for lack of better words. I think that, he's a veteran. He knows how to handle this kind of stretch. I mean, it's not the first time that he's had a string of losses together as a guy who's been in this league for as long as he has. And I think that that's also a mental aspect that's really important for a backup goaltender. And I think it's just, he had a tough go in Nashville. I mean, that was a great game all around. 2 goals. You can't fault the guy. It was a physical game. Everybody's in his business in the crease, and it's a tough game to get through. I don't think that game was his fault. Aside from the Columbus game, I really don't think any of the games have been Halak's fault. I think that the ones that he's lost, the Rangers defense hasn't been as sharp in front of him. So I think that's a complete overreaction. And I no doubt Louis Domingue is also, a great third stringer. And I think that, if an injury were to arise, it would be great to have a guy like Louis Domingue waiting in the wings as well. But where it currently stands, Halak is the number 2. And I don't think that the Rangers are in the market for another goalie at this moment in time.
There's been some unfortunate games. That's the way that I would put it. I mean, it's just, bad luck. And honestly, that's how it goes sometimes. Just a matter of the way that the puck bounces. So, all right, another overreaction, early season overreaction. The Rangers' current goal differential is a reason for concern. And mind you, the goal differential right now is +4. So obviously, I mean, it means a lot of things. It means that they've allowed a lot of goals, but they're also not shooting as many goals as they should. So again, overreaction.
I wouldn't say this is much of an overreaction as the first one. I think I would phrase this one a little bit differently. I don't think the Rangers are playing well enough with leads. Mind you, they haven't had a had a lot of time with leads as well. So I think that this is also something. I mean, after the Arizona game, I basically said like last season's Rangers team had their fingerprints all over this one, and I feel like that's been a bit of a theme in the recent games. I just which is we get into this with Larry too. Like it's not the analytics don't always tell the whole story, you know, like you could look at bad analytics, you could look at good analytics and the wins and losses, and they just don't correlate. But I just think that the Rangers' biggest problem in this category would be playing with leads. I think they need to be more cognizant of that and lock down a little bit more. And sometimes they can get a little bit flimsy, get a little bit loose when they are sitting on a 2-goal, 3-goal lead. And, you know, those are the most dangerous leads in hockey, as everybody knows. So I think that but that was also a problem with last season's team. So I think that those types of habits, the last thing the Rangers want to do is revert into them. So I think that the number one thing would be to just playing better with leads. So I don't think that's that big of an overreaction. I think that's the little bit of a cause for concern in the Rangers locker room. I think that's something that they're all aware of.
See many of 3-goal leads disappear in thin air during my days. I'm sure you have too, Molly. So we'll do one more. The rest of the Metro has gotten better while the Rangers have gotten worse. Overreaction?
I think it's too early to say whether the Rangers have gotten worse, because I still think there are things that need to be ironed out and could be ironed out with time, such as Vincent Trocheck with Artemi Panarin and the line combinations in general. I think that we've seen a lot of movement. The fact that Vitaly Krasov hasn't been able to be healthy has also played into that fact as well. There hasn't just been a lot of continuity with the lineup. So I think it's still too early to say that the Rangers have gotten worse, but it is not too early to say the rest of the Metro has gotten better. That is a statement that I agree with, and that is also something that I feel like the team is cognizant of, and is something to consider as they keep going forward here, because it is true. The teams around them have gotten better, and there are teams that are off to some crazy starts. I mean, the Bruins, for crying out loud, like Jesus Christ, like they're going to be a problem. That is a problem team right there for everybody in the National Hockey League. So I think that it's a half and half for that one right there. I think part of it is true, and the other half, I'd say it's still too early to say.
Definitely agree. I mean, it's wild just to see what New Jersey's doing. I know the
Mm-hmm.
Isles are playing well. Carolina, of course, they're playing well. And then, of course, you can't ever, count out Washington. You can't count out Pittsburgh. So it's tough to kind of see exactly, how the Rangers compare to these other teams. Which are they overperforming, or are they just playing to their ability, which they very well could be. So I guess we'll see. Time will
I think
tell.
they're underperforming.
Yeah.
I think they're underperforming to their capabilities, because we've all seen, I mean, a majority of this team, aside from the trade deadline acquisitions, it's the same nuts and bolts of
Yeah.
last season's team. Like the framework is still there. It hasn't changed. So I think that it's a little bit of a case of underperforming, I think.
Very well could be. Hopefully that's the case, because at that point, then they would perform a little bit better. Let's move on to little subtext questions. You got a bunch of questions, and I know you've done a great job, and thank you to the listeners for sending these, or your readers for sending these over, whatnot. So we'll get into these before we get to the great Larry Brooks in a little bit. First subtext question comes from Liam Murphy and John Romano. Roster decisions, cap crunch. Who is the odd player out?
We get into this a little bit with Larry later on, but it's looking like it's coming down to Gauthier, Reaves, or Carpenter. And each one of them has a case for why they should remain on the roster. You got Gauthier, who seems to be finding his stride here. And I've been saying it for a while. Lord help everybody else, once he puts it together consistently, he could really be just not, I don't want to go as far to say an X factor, but an unexpected addition and contributing addition to the bottom six of this Rangers team, which would be huge and really beneficial for them. on the other hand, if he doesn't reach that upside or fulfill that upside, then he might be the odd one out here. Ryan Carpenter, he's a center. That's the big thing that he has going in his corner. He's been pretty good on faceoffs, I'd say. Not even just decent. He's been pretty good on faceoffs. And because he's a center, the Rangers are obviously thin at that position. They really only have Barclay Goodrow, who can do wing and center. And we all see that Gerard Gallant loves to plug him in the top six amid injury and when he wants to spark. So that really leaves the only other person on the entire roster that could fill that fourth line center role is Carpenter. So for those reasons, it also might be difficult to send him down. And then, of course, we have Ryan Reaves, who brings his own separate set of benefits to the Rangers, just his presence on the ice, the physicality that he brings. I thought he was pretty good in the Nashville game. The fight, he was into it. He led the team in hits, and they needed him in that kind of game against the Nashville Predators. So, but the other half of it is he struggles to keep up with the play sometimes, and he doesn't really drive the forecheck like how the fourth line wants to be playing. And that's kind of something that Julien Gauthier does. Julien Gauthier has brought a lot of speed to the bottom six, which is something that they've needed. So I think that the Rangers have a lot of things to consider and a lot of questions to answer when it comes to that question. But the one thing that is for certain is they have to get down to 22 at one point or another in the name of cap space. And that's the most important thing. But I mean, if I had to guess, I think it's going to end up being Gauthier, just because of a lot of things. I don't know if they're ready to move on from Reaves just yet. He's a huge part of the locker room, and a huge part of the team in general. So I think if I had to put a name on it, I think it's going to be Gauthier. Whether or not I think that's the right decision, I'm not sure. So
I mean, someone has to release Shesty, and usually it's Reaves.
yeah,
So I mean,
just has to happen.
It'd be tough to let him go at that point. Also, side note, Mollie, you did an awesome piece on Gauthier. Totally recommend everyone checking it out. It really does show why, it is a tough decision at that point, because someone like him who's fighting for his time, there's a reason why, like you said, once he gets going and he's good, he's going to be very, very valuable to this club. So definitely recommend checking that out if anyone hasn't yet. Another question from Robert Torito and Paul Karp. Is Jimmy Vesey in the top 5 sustainable, or are we in reality a top 6 forward short if we want to keep the kid line intact? This plug and play each game is fine for now, but as we get closer to the playoffs, the line as best as possible needs to be set.
Jimmy Vesey is sitting as one of your most consistent top 6 forwards. The Rangers have a problem. Obviously, he was brought on to fill a bottom 6 role, but he has played pretty well and well enough to earn that spot in the top 6. I think so. Sustainable? No. I definitely don't think that Jimmy Vesey is the long-term answer to a top 6 spot. I think that the Rangers, I mean, we said this about Barclay Goodrow all the time. The Rangers are at their best when Barclay Goodrow is on the fourth line. I think the same thing for Jimmy Vesey. I think the Rangers are at their best if Jimmy Vesey is filling a bottom 6 role, whether it's the third or fourth line. It doesn't really matter. But Jimmy Vesey has been really good for them. He has leapfrogged Ryan Carpenter on the PK rotation. And that is something he told me he takes a lot of pride in. It's something he took a lot of pride in last season in Jersey. And I think that for right now it's okay, but I'm in agreement with the people who wrote this question that it is not a sustainable long-term answer. But for right now it's okay, and it is a credit to Jimmy Vesey for what he's done for the Rangers so far.
All right, let's do one more here before we get to Larry. From Matthew Donahue, or Dohan, sorry. Sorry, Matthew. How are Matt Robertson and Will Cooley progressing at Hartford, and what are their chances of being recalled in the event of the inevitable injuries to come?
Will Cooley has been Hartford's best player from what I understand, which is a good thing. Matt Robertson has also done good. I just, I don't know. I wasn't impressed with Robertson during training camp, and I know that the Rangers weren't impressed with him during training camp, considering how quickly they sent him down during training camp. So I think that that is something that's in the back of everybody's mind. I think Cooley would probably be the one that would come up sooner rather than later amid a lot of injuries. But I think that they are comfortable with the 23 that they have now. I think that if it is Gauthier that goes back down, he'll be the one that comes right back up. Just because I feel like the Rangers, you know, are not in the business of rushing their prospects anymore. I think that you know, that has been a lesson learned several times over. So there is nothing wrong with letting Will Cooley marinate in the American Hockey League for longer than maybe fans would like. But I think that another question that somebody asked is why Libor Hájek over Zach Jones, and that hasn't always been the case. You know, they've kind of been trading off here. You know, Zach Jones has a tough game, Libor Hájek comes in. Libor Hájek has an okay game, Zach Jones comes in. And I think that's also a testament to the Rangers just wanting to be fair to both players, especially where Libor Hájek's concerned. Gerard Gallant said it himself. What happened last season with Libor is not going to happen this season again. And I get the impression that they do want to give Libor a chance to just kind of showcase himself a little bit, you know, get back into the game a little bit, which he really wasn't able to do last season when he played a career low amount of games between the NHL and the AHL, which is just wildly unfair. But so for those reasons, I think that, you know, they're comfortable with their D core at the moment. But I also just don't think Robertson has done enough to warrant a recall at this moment in time. Cooley, on the other hand, maybe sometime down the road, and he's been doing really, really well for them in Hartford.
It's all about playing time with the Rangers right now and trying to find the right piece that fit in. So the Rangers have been struggling to find some consistency on this early part of the season here. What have you noticed so far about them, especially with the road trip coming up? Does it feel like at least a trip to the West Coast, they'll be able to at least settle in a little bit and try to find something along the lines of, you know, consistent?
I don't know that there's a magic elixir coming up on this trip. It would behoove them to try and find some consistency, I think, in their game. They're still looking for combinations up front. You know, they're I mean, the one combination we know that works is Kreider Zibanejad. We kind of think that the kid line works, but you know, the second line hasn't. The Trocheck Panarin combination, you know, hasn't really reached fruition at this point. There's still issues with their right side on the top two lines. Jimmy Vesey's doing a good job filling in, but you know, he was signed to be a bottom six, fourth line player essentially, and he talked about how he had made the adjustment mentally to becoming a fourth line player, and now he's a top line player. So ideally, you don't really want Jimmy Vesey to be in your top six. You don't want Barclay Goodrow to be in your top six because that weakens either the third or fourth line, however they're set up. So I think they have a lot to settle. That doesn't mean that they can't win while they're attempting to settle this. And listen, their key is exactly what it was last year. It's getting superior goaltending from Shesterkin. He played extremely well on Sunday night against Arizona. That's the most important issue for the Rangers right now, as I see it. There are a couple of others. They're giving up too much. The Trouba-Miller pair is bleeding goals. But honestly, if they get Shesterkin back to a semblance of where he was last year, they'll be fine. Though they're facing, you know, if they're getting kind of average goaltending most nights, then they're going to struggle the way most teams are going to struggle, you know, and they have to get their power play working. It's, you know, their signature, Igor Shesterkin in their power play. That's their signature. And so far, they've both been average on both fronts. So that's kind of why the Rangers have been average.
Lots of moving parts, Larry. I completely agree. We got to bunch of subtext questions today, so I'm just going to dive right into those for you. We have one from Brett Lustig and Matt Labriola. What is Ryan Reaves' role going to be? He has been scratched 4 of the past 5 games. I understand the need for skill over toughness, but do you think at least one player on the ice protecting your stars, opposing players are a lot less likely to take liberties at the likes of Bread, Adam Fox, Mika Zibanejad with Reaves on the ice, rather than if he's in the press box? He also gives the team energy. I think he is valuable and should be playing more. Gauthier has skill, but can't put the puck in the net. And besides, 1 goal from Ryan Carpenter has been useless. So Ryan Reaves should be getting more than he is. Your thoughts, Larry?
My thoughts are that if Ryan Reaves had a little better foot speed, he'd be in the lineup every night, but he is struggling to keep up. And I talked to him on Tuesday before the Rangers left, and I wrote about this situation for Wednesday's paper. Wednesday's Post, and was online Tuesday afternoon. And he talked about how he knew that he needed work to try and regain his speed. And that's the issue now with Ryan Reaves, is can he keep up? It's extremely difficult for any older player when you get into your 30s, and he's 35 now. It's extremely difficult for a guy of that age to play 7 or 8 minutes a night. It is a challenge to be able to play well with those few minutes and those few reps. So that's another challenge for him. I don't believe. Well, first, the question about does it prevent liberties being taken against Panarin, Zibanejad, whomever. Ryan Reaves is never on the ice with those guys, so there's not a direct correlation. He played in Nashville the other night. I thought he was fine in Nashville actually, but that didn't stop Ryan Lindgren from being jumped and getting into this fight where he was bloodied. And he's not really a deterrent, and that's not singling him out. I don't think there is such a thing as a deterrent in the National Hockey League. I listen. The Bruins have always been one of the toughest teams in the league. They, for years and years, and they stand up for one another. But a couple of years ago, that didn't stop Tom Wilson from concussing Brandon Carlo, right? So I don't think you can be a deterrent. What I do believe, though, is having someone like Reaves does embolden players a little bit more, does give them a sense of they have a little bit more room on the ice and they're a little bit braver. But looking at where the Rangers are, looking at their cap situation, they have got to get down to 22 players. They have just got to get down to 22 players, or they're simply not going to have any space with which to make deals at the deadline. Forget about Patrick Kane. They won't be able to get a 4th-line player. So it is imperative for them to get down to 22. Now, I had thought that Ryan Carpenter made a lot of sense. I don't think he's been terribly effective in his role as a 4th-line center. However, with Kravtsov so fragile, I mean, you just don't know. And I don't mean to be beating on this 23-year-old young person, but you just don't know if he's going to be available from game to game. He's missed 10 games so far with a number of different issues. But if Kravtsov's not in, and the coaches believe that Goodrow is the best guy to fill his hole in the top 6, then that leaves the center spot on the 4th line open, which is Ryan Carpenter's spot. So, the jigsaw puzzle right now, I don't think creates a scenario under which Ryan Carpenter is going to be the guy to go. I think it will be, and unless they just try and ride this out for a while more, I wouldn't expect them to make a move on this trip. I would think one would be coming after they come home, but unless they want to ride it out and just be in a terrible cap situation, it would seem to me that it would be Reaves or Gauthier. Gauthier's playing, he's done well and he still has some upside, but if he's never going to be a top 9 player, then you have to think of, well, what's Gautier's value as a fourth liner as opposed to Reaves as a fourth liner. But again, if they don't think Reaves can play back to back, if they don't think he can get more than 7 or 8 minutes a game, it's an issue they're going to have to confront. So I think Reaves now is a candidate, but I'm not suggesting that he will be the guy. It's going to be a tough call for them. But the one thing I do know is that they have to get down to 22.
This next question is something that you and I have talked a lot about, Larry, ice time, and you've written quite a lot about it too. From Jeff Corsello, I imagine this is what a lot of fans are thinking. Why should Gerard Gallant care if, quote unquote, as soon as I sit them down a little bit, then they're looking at me because they want to get on the ice? He is the coach. He's supposed to lead the team and control their ice time for their own good. How is power play 2 ever going to become effective if Gallant allows power play 1 to stay on for 2 minutes because he doesn't like them giving him the side eye?
I doubt that I doubt that the coach wanted to be taken literally yesterday. I think he was. I think you know him.
Yeah.
He doesn't give a lot of fodder. He doesn't throw too much stuff out there. I think he was just looking for a way to get out of the question at that point.
Yeah,
I think I pressed him, a little bit on it, and so no.
His point was that the players want to play.
Right. His point was the players want to play, and everyone wants to play.
Right.
All top players want to play. Where I have the issue is on the power play. If they're not getting it done in the first 50 seconds, they've got to get off. Honestly. Now there are those power plays where they just maintain control.
That's the thing. They get the puck back.
You're not going to change when you have possession in the offensive zone. But I think that if they don't get it going 45, 50 seconds and there's a clear, they should not stay on for that second minute. And I think as the coach, that's Gallant's responsibility, or the assistant coach who's handling the power play, if that's the way it's run. But and I mentioned this. I don't think this is the same as 2 years ago when I wrote about the first power play just being entitled. I had never seen anything like it. They just refused to come off the ice. It's not to that extent, but they stay on too long. They do, and it would be one thing if they were hitting at 35%, but they're not. They're basically league average. They're 15th in the league or so. So them staying on for a minute 20, minute 30 is not helping. And it's funny. I didn't finish it, but I remember last year looking at the amount of time it took on the power play for the Rangers to score, because I wanted to check to see how many goals did they score after the minute 10 mark, minute 20 mark. And I think I may have finished it. I don't remember the number, but it was a minuscule number, honestly. So if they're not scoring in the first minute 10, chances are they're not scoring. They're not scoring a minute 40 into the power play. A forward on the second power play unit has not scored since David Quinn was the coach. It's crazy. And it's crazy. I don't know if it's, but then you look and see, even when they get, say, 45 seconds of ice time, the second unit, well, most of the time, the first 10 to 12 seconds of that is them going back to pick up the puck behind the net, setting up, coming up ice, getting an entry. So they don't get set up maybe until there are 30 seconds left in the power play or 28 seconds left in the power play. Then they're frantic rushing around, and you can understand why no one on that second power play unit has a goal this year, and why no forward ever scores. I agree with the question. The person who posed the question. I agree. The second power play is never going to create any kind of a rhythm. It's never going to be productive if they're getting 30 seconds of power play. That really needs to change.
Yeah, and that also comes down to the development of Alexi Lafreniere and Capo Caco. I feel like those are two guys that not only do they want them to be staples in the top 6, but eventually power play guys. So
well, Hedl too. I mean, yeah. Hedl gets even less ice time a lot of times because Trocheck and Zibanejad eat up so much.
Yeah.
Their first two centers, they eat up so much time. Both at 5-on-5 and on the first power play unit, that Philip Hedl, who scores at a greater rate than anybody on the team, has the best goals for percentage of anybody on the team, just doesn't get enough ice time. So yes, I do think the imbalance of ice is not particularly healthy. Now, does it mean automatically that these guys are going to run down? No, but it means that other guys are not getting enough ice time. And Gallant did acknowledge that yesterday. He said, "Yeah, I know. I want to get other guys ice time too." So, I do. I think that's an issue going forward.
I kind of just had this thought, and I've thought about it before, but we've obviously talked about that the Artemi Panarin, Vincent Trocheck duo isn't coming along as quickly as the team probably would like. What do you think the odds are that maybe Philip Hedl could step up into the middle spot next to Artemi Panarin at some point?
Not sure. You would just flip.
Why not?
You would just flip Hedl with Trocheck. I don't know.
Yeah.
And have
Just an idea.
And have Trocheck play with Kako and
Yeah.
Lafreniere. Maybe.
Why not? Because that kind of solves a little bit of both, gives him more ice time, gets him next to a super dynamic winger, which we know Philip Hedl hasn't really had that much time next to that kind of caliber wingers. Why not see what he can do?
Yeah, why not? I mean, Philip likes to handle the puck, though.
Yeah,
he generally likes to have the puck, which he wouldn't have as often. I think he played with him a bit last year when Strome was injured early in the year, or was it injured or COVID? COVID early in the year. I think Philip played up with Panarin a bit. I don't think they played together a lot. It's something to consider. Yeah, for sure, it's something to consider. But I also think that if you're going to consider breaking up the kids, then you have to again rethink about, well, maybe Kako should be playing up with Kreider and Zibanejad, or maybe Lafreniere should be playing up there, or does Lafreniere need to stay on the left? There are, I mean, to use your words, still a lot of moving pieces here. I don't think much is settled, except that you're going to have Fox and Lindgren playing together. You're going to have Trouba and Miller playing together. You're going to have Zibanejad and Kreider playing together. I think that's set, but I don't think really anything else is set going forward.
We got this last one from John Antista. From last year so far, the Rangers are shooting a lot more. The concern I have is that too many times no one is screening the goalie. And as you know, if the goalie can see it, most likely he will stop it. They need to get dirty goals from in close. Screening the goalie produces rebounds. Also, my opinion is Sammy Blais is still not right and not playing his game. I agree with the dirty goal assessment. I think they need some dirty goals to open things up for them offensively. What do you think?
Yeah, I'd like to see it. I think Sammy Blais is not. I don't think it's 100%. He's not playing his game. I think the last couple of games that you can see him playing more to his game, and even was it the last game? I think it was, right, where they had him. They were gone, had him up on the second power play unit, right?
Yes.
For a bit. So I think they're seeing a little bit more out of him. I think he's feeling a little bit more comfortable, feeling a little healthier, maybe more confident with the knee. The dirty goals, everybody wants dirty goals, but that's really not their team.
Yeah.
You're not going to see Artemi Panarin scoring many dirty goals. You're just not. I think Mikko will go to those areas, but he's a shooter. He's not getting many from around the net. Jimmy Vesey, he'll get some around the net. Trocheck, yes, I think he will. I don't think Trocheck has found his game yet. I don't think he's found his comfort level here, trying to fit into a new team, trying to fit in with Panarin. I think he's playing okay. He's eating up a lot of minutes. He always plays hard. He's always working.
Yeah.
But I just don't think he is yet at the level where he was at Carolina. So I think that's, I think it's fair to expect more from him. And I think it's fair to expect that more will come from him. But he's a guy who can score, the dirty goal. Kako can. You'd like to see Lafreniere, and I'd like to see Lafreniere in those dirty areas a lot more than he has been this year. I think Lafreniere's the last few weeks has been pretty average, actually, to tell you the truth. So I think they need more from him. I think they need their players to be playing, better. It's not just go out and score dirty goals. I think everybody wants that. But I think they just, their guys who are straight line guys need to get to the net. I think that's fair to say. I think, Goodrow for his, time on ice should be around the net. And he is. He's a guy who's going to score from around the net. So sometimes heavy volume shot teams, maybe the Rangers shouldn't be a heavy volume shot team. What I find interesting was last year when the analytics cast such a negative light on the team. People were saying, well, forget about the analytics. Who cares about the analytics? We're winning. Now that the analytics, show that, the analytics are outperforming the actual team, people are saying, yeah, but the analytics. So, if they didn't matter last year, they shouldn't matter this year. And that's kind of where I come down. I don't think that because the expected goals for on public data is real good, I don't think that means that the Rangers suddenly are going to break out into becoming this high-scoring team. Maybe they're a team that needs to be more selective on their shots because of this heavy volume shooting team that they've turned into, and certainly on the power play where they're at the top of the league in attempted shots, and they're at the top of the league, top 2 or 3 in shots on goal, hasn't translated at all, because they're 14, 15 in the league and power play efficiency. So I'm not sure that just pounding shots on net necessarily suits this team's style.
The great Larry Brooks, bringing it as he always does in the podcast. Larry, have a good one.
Thanks a lot, guys.